Starting. So hello everyone. Good evening from Italy. It's evening time here. I don't know what time where you guys are, but today's topic is going to be radical resilience. So I presume that's going to be a little bit different from traditional resilience. But anyway, we have Aneesa Theron, who's going to tell us what this is all about. Let me just introduce our guest speaker, topic facilitator today. Her name is Aneesa Theron. I'm saying that rightly. Coaching alchemist, a conscious catalyst, transformational leader, wealth engineer. Wow. She passionately inspires leaders to cultivate meaningful relationships in a high-performance culture. She talks about compassion, leadership, performance, relationships, and transformation. Her personal philosophy is, we choose to be a victim of our environment or allow it to shape our life's direction. So today's topic is radical resilience. So welcome, Aneesa, and perhaps we can just throw some light on on the topic, and we could take it from there.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Gary and Stephen and Lily, for being here as well, and really that amazing introduction. It is not always great to hear. We don't like to hear these things about ourselves, even though we write it about ourselves. But when somebody reads it out, it's like, whoa, okay. But part of that, let's delve into it. Radical resilience is part of what the journey is, right? Our entire life's journey encapsulates having some form of resilience, being able to basically withstand what we refer to as those dark night of the soul experiences. So for those that don't know or that might be listening to the replay, I always refer to it as each and every person has a hero's journey. And in that hero's journey, you're either going to heed the call to that adventure, or you're going to refuse the call. And in the refusal of the call, you're going to repeat those same lessons, and those experiences, those difficult experiences will continue to show up. And then what the universe does is it says, well, let's force this person's hand in becoming more resilient. I see there's more people joining. Do you want to greet them, or do I continue?
Yeah, you can continue. We'll have time anyway. We have an hour together, so there will be time for interaction, and these are people who come on to the BEwell webinars every week, so they know. Go, Aneesa.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So what I was saying, nice to see you, Paul. Nice to see you, Mariam. Well, I don't see you, Mariam, but nice to have you here. So just in terms of that journey, once again, it's you either accept the call or you don't in terms of the hero's journey. And in that, you are asked to basically have resilience, but radical resilience. Because a lot of these experiences in your hero's journey is things that you're going to lose in your life. So you might lose a loved one. You might be laid off from work. You might not have gotten the promotion that you wanted, that you worked so hard for. You might have possibly desired to achieve a particular degree in your educational studies, but you possibly fail in inverted commas, I would say, right? So radical resilience is basically being able to stand or withstand the test of time, no matter what that experience is thrown at you, is that you're an overcomer of what that experience is going to bring to you. You're going to see it as an opportunity and a catalyst that is going to take you to the next trajectory of your life. But at the end of the day, what it requires is to embrace almost those difficult, challenging roadblocks, obstacles, barriers that show up in your life. So I'm going to pause there, Gary, if you want to interject, or Stephen, if you have any questions there.
I was just trying to understand the difference between the resilience that we normally talk about and a radical resilience. I mean, it's, you know, the word radical always seems quite sort of, well, it's something
Right.
more that I've got to do. Is it something more? Is it some incorporating other stuff in the resilience? Is that what it is?
Absolutely, because being resilient is being able to just, you're going to be okay with what's coming your way. But radical resilience is asking of us to understand the impermanence and almost embracing what is showing up in that moment, not being able to, not fighting it, really just being in allowance and flow of it. There's a difference, because if you think, I always use the analogy of the ebb and flow of the ocean, right? So the ebbs, the flows, it's often also referred to as the floods. Now, the ocean, I call it a she, and sorry, gentlemen, I think she's just so majestic and powerful. So I call it a she, has the ability to be radically resilient, right? Why? Because she's got to withstand so many toxicities that enters her environment, be it plastic. I'm just using this to frame it in a different way for everyone. And yet, as she pushes out that tide, she pushes out any toxicities, anything that is there to threaten her environment. But she does so very gracefully, knowing that it's impermanent, that this too shall pass, and that the calmness and the tranquility and the sereneness will come back again. So I love the ocean analogy, because that is the epitome of what radical resilience is in Mother Nature. And we are part of nature, we are one with nature. So if we can embody understanding, holding that place of what I refer to as being equanimous, staying calm, balanced, and composed, regardless of how that tide and floods are coming in. It's just to stay calm, composed, and centered within yourself, knowing that if there's equanimity in my approach, I am not going to shift into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. My brain is then designed to know that, hold on, this is not going to be indefinitely like this. So let me embrace it, understand it, heed whatever the lessons are that I need to from it. That for me is the embodiment of radical resilience.
So where did the moment come when we moved from traditional resilience to radical resilience? What happened?
Oh my gosh. I mean, COVID happened, many other experiences I alluded to earlier on, that I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, right? So in their businesses, they reach a particular threshold of nearly getting to success. But then what happens is imposter syndrome comes up. So those adaptations, those assumed adaptations of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, who am I to think I could be great? Who do I think I might, how did I even think I might be running a successful, sustainable business that could be impacting and driving shared value? In that moment, you cannot only rely on traditional resilience. You're going to have to deal with, and Gary, you're familiar with this, what those saboteurs are. How do we sabotage ourselves in those moments? And that's when we are being asked to step into our own wisdom, into the sage part of our brain. And a lot of what I'm speaking about will be linked to either positive intelligence, and you've been exposed to that, Gary, and some of you might have heard of that. But also my training as a coach is it's stemmed in the neuroscience modality. So when we shift from the adaptation of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, who am I to think I'm going to be great? And it's asking us to move into radical resilience. We are being asked to step into being more empathetic, being more curious, innovating, and asking ourselves to how do we then step into that curiosity, allowing ourselves to accept whatever might come our way. And even if it means that we failed as an entrepreneur, again, fail as my coach calls it, for all I learn, it's not a fail. That is where radical resilience comes in. If you are willing to step into darkness, what is perceived to be discomfort and dis-ease and the dissonance around facing oneself. So it's about coming back to truth, Gary, and everyone. I think it's how do you come back to truth? Because that's when you get to radical resilience.
Yeah, we're talking about resilience today. I mean, adapting to the ever-changing, the landscape of work and remote working, and so on. It's just everything is changing. So, can you give us some, tips on how to be more resilient? What can we do? I mean, obviously, it is a mindset as well.
Yes, yes. So, I find even with my clients, I call them coaching partners, because whether I'm coaching somebody or whether I'm in a design thinking facilitation session where we're facilitating particular outcomes, whether it is looking at systems thinking and understanding what are the root causes, it is ultimately just to pause and to reflect, because we don't do that. We don't take the time to pause and reflect, which then brings insight. And if we can look at it holistically of where am I now within this moment, whether it is my personal or professional context, where am I now? So I always speak about, what do people do when they want to lose weight? Oh, it's New Year's. It's New Year's. It's still the beginning of this year. What do they do? It's New Year's resolutions. It's let's find the better way, and I'm going to be this person, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to achieve that. And then what happens by the end of Jan or even by Feb? It's fallen flat. So radical resilience, and some of the tools that I give my clients, is to say, do a deep dive assessment of where you are now in your life across the different areas that you want transformation or improvement on. And that assessment includes what is working in what I'm doing and what's not working. What are some of those pros and cons of my actions, behaviors, thoughts, in how I show up? What are the advantages or disadvantages? So that is one strategy, is to do it, an assessment of where you are now. Because then you get clarity and insight to understand what is driving your environment to go into a monkey mind, negative thought process. I call it jumping from one negative thought branch to the next. And those thoughts aren't often true. Because when we're doing the pause and reflecting, we're not participating with our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. What we're rather doing is saying, let's understand where it's coming from. Again, systems thinking comes in here. What's in that system that is either hindering or constraining this person to be a successful business entrepreneur, to be a good parent? For those that are us, our moms, we know we struggle with that often. To be a good father, to whatever the context is, we cannot have a vision and aspiration of the future if we don't critically understand where we are now. So that's strategy number one, tool number one. I'm going to pause and take a sip of water.
Me too. Someone can ask a question. I'm going to have everybody's going to have a sip of their tea or their water.
It's such a lovely discussion. And I love that idea of, of that radical resilience. And what came to mind is, not only bouncing back, but bouncing back in a very specific targeted area for success. And I kind of changed, for all I learned, I love that, but I kind of view it as first attempt in learning, right? So it's like, we're starting out. And what a wonderful way. And it's that growth mindset that, we do experience some darkness and some difficulty in this life. But if you are resilient, you're going to bounce, you're not going to be in that place of of trauma or experience longer than you must be, right? You'll take from it what you need to learn, and you'll move on. So thank you for that topic.
Anyone else before we continue?
Lily, what's your take on radical resilience? What do you?
No, I'm just enjoying listening to the perspective, and I love like the connection with nature and getting back to your own nature, which actually helps you tap into like what you're needing to be resilient in, it seems. So thank you for that connection.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think mine was like, not fighting it, because I always thought resilient was actually being, strong and tough and break face and fighting it. Whereas from what Aneesa is saying is like this radical resilience is actually absorbing it, accepting it, like the ocean analogy, sort of let it come into you and accept it and be part of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul
I sort of,
or anyone else?
so the word acceptance also came up for me, Gary, because it was like, it's things happen, and if there's resistance, then it becomes a problem. But if we accept it and we approach it like we chose it, and it becomes a choice, then we're better able to deal with whatever is happening. And then brought up the thing, it's almost like approach it like you wrote this. This is your script, you wrote it, now be part of it so you can grow from it.
Absolutely. So you've touched on a few things. I just want to say hi to Michael and hi to Shida for joining us. Thank you for being here.
Aangenaam McKinnons and all that
Aangenaam
jazz.
McKinnons. Is that Michael from South Africa?
It is,
Oh,
yeah.
God. Nice to have another South African here.
Aangenaam kennis Aneesa. Ek is ook oorspronklik van die Kaap.
Yes, ook Afrikaans. Ek het so
Maar ek
gedink.
ek bly op oomblik in Spanje, so daar's 3 van ons.
Oh, then. So Gary and Stephen and Lily, Afrikaans is just another second language in South Africa, as you might or might not be aware. So it's interesting to have that dialogue included here.
And I really love the topic with the resilience part. And what flowed was, I don't know how many of you do yoga, but there's a position called the hollow wreath. So whether something's negative or positive, we get to choose to allow it to flow through us, or we get to attach onto certain positive attributes to springboard, I guess. No, the hollow wreath, the yoga position.
I need to get back to yoga, Michael. I haven't been for a long, long time. So that's something I need to go and practice radical resilience in again, because it's not an easy. People think yoga is easy, and the same with Pilates. But there, you definitely require a sort of radical resilience, because the mind, body, soul, spirit, in being able to be present in that moment. So I'm glad you brought up a different approach to thinking about radical resilience, because you could very quickly easily give up. So I just want to share a funny story. When I had I think it was my second baby or my third, I decided to go back into training. And it was, I was on my maternity leave period, and there were all these seniors that were there. And I say seniors because they were in their mid-60s or older. And I got into these classes. I'm like thinking, wow, look at these ladies. They are just brilliant. Their posture and everything is just beautiful. And in the first session, I felt like, whoa, I want to give up. I want to give up. This is not for me. I look like an idiot. Like I'm younger. I'm like half their age. But what was interesting is that sense of belonging also shifted my approach to say, well, it's okay. Persevere. Perseverance is also very important in radical resilience, and not giving up. I see somebody's made a note there. Yeah, so it's how do you continue the journey no matter how difficult those roadblocks or barriers and obstacles and challenges that are going to show up. I do want to touch on something that Gary mentioned earlier, that it's not about fighting it. It's about being in flow of it. But what do we do when these dark, difficult experiences show up? We want to run away from it, right? We often just want to run for the hills and say, or we question it. Why is this happening to me? So we go into sort of the victim consciousness, and there are 4 levels of, and I'm going to get back to some more tools now, Gary, but there are 4 stages of awareness and consciousness. The first one, and it's by Michael Bernard Beckwith for those that want to go look into his work. He speaks about the first level being, why is this happening to me? And so in that stage, radical resilience will be non-existent, because you're almost feeling like everyone's against you, the world is against you. The second level is, this is happening through me. So I'm actually a co-creator of this. How am I co-creating my environment right now? And what is it asking of me to shift? The third level is, this is happening for me, in my favor. So there's a level of acceptance that comes here to say, well, I'm not meant to be held back by this. What am I meant to take from this? How is this going to shift me forward? Let me not fight against the tide here. What message or lesson is coming from this? If it has to come through me, it's happening for me, in my favor, in other words. And Lily, I think you would like the final stage of this is, I am one with it. So I'm not fighting it. I'm one with it. I'm in flow with this.
What was the first one? Aneesa, can you say the first one again?
This is happening to me. So it's that victim
To me.
consciousness. Yes. I'm a victim.
Okay.
The whole world's against me.
Yes.
So the radical resilience requires awareness. I almost want to say radical awareness. How do I sabotage myself? How do I, what are those accomplices that are playing havoc in terms of the awareness of how I'm co-creating this? Or am I blaming, shaming, and labeling everyone else that they are the problem and not me?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on all of this really good stuff here. Just the COVID and my business, bringing it into the business context. And
Yes.
yeah, this is happening to us when the business hit and we had to move everything from the classrooms to online. It was like we were the victims, and why is this happening to us?
Yes.
Then the co-creating, I don't know. I'm trying to think about that, but it came to this is happening for me. Now there's a realization after 2 years and lots of changes and lots of heartbreak, and 2023 was a really tough year. And now come to the realization it happened for me.
Yes.
I had to make some changes that I wasn't courageous enough to do on my own, but it pushed me, and I've done it, and I'm in a better place today. But so I'm just following the steps. The last one, I'm one with this, not yet, but I'm in the third phase. So.
Gary, and we will kind of fluctuate between them depending on where we are.
Yeah.
With mindset, with heart set, with soul sets being our spirit. We tend to, we are taught to shame our feelings and emotions. We are taught not to feel. So radical resilience asks you to feel, to be in allowance of, not to push away, not to suppress, not to wear these, what is referred to as the personality archetypal roles, the personas that we show up to the world with. So we show to the world that we are on top of things. We are okay. But beneath the surface, what's sitting beneath the surface, let's talk about, again, systems thinking here, the iceberg. the conditioned beliefs. Somebody spoke about the story, the script. What radical resilience is asking you here in the iceberg context, on the floor or seafloor of the iceberg, is what are those beliefs and stories and narratives that were shaped by all our different constructs? Family, social, political, religious construct, it doesn't matter which, or educational construct. What are those beliefs and stories? And are we going to continue with the scripting of that story? Because that scripting will show up in every context, whether we feel we're good enough to run this business, where we have imposter syndrome. And that narrative is what's driving the thinking. And the thinking is not empowering. It's often disempowering and self-limiting. And still at the bottom of the iceberg, which we don't show the world, is those thoughts drive our emotions. And that's where it's the threshold of getting to the top of the iceberg, which is that resilience that's required, that radical resilience that's required to live in our truth. Because the top of the iceberg asks us to release the personas and the masks that we show up with, and to live within our core value system. And people find it very difficult to live in the truth of their values, because people pleaser, hero, rescuer, savior shows up, right? So those are just some of the personality archetypal roles that shows up. What it's asking us to say is, establish those boundaries, speak up, be resilient and radically resilient enough to say no, or to say this is incongruent with me within my value system, because that causes dis-ease and dissonance if we're not in truth. I want to actually ask some questions, if I may, that I've...
It's all yours. It's all yours.
Any comments before we go into questions?
Listening to some interesting stuff over there, like, talk about resilience and radical resilience. The resilience is where, like, where you had to also, as an entrepreneur or whatever, hide your feelings, or had to always put up a brave face when things were going wrong and you couldn't show it to other people, and you were isolated as an entrepreneur. Now we're in another, this is me, I'm talking about 25 years ago when I opened my business, where you took all those emotions, you took it home. It was inside of you, bubbling away, ready to exploded at home with the family or on the tennis court or whatever it was, and you didn't show any of that. Now we're talking about resilience, radical resilience, where you become authentic and you open up and you show your vulnerability. So there is I can see the difference, from a traditional resilience to where we are today, talk about radical resilience. So I do see a difference about that. So just wanted to just add on to what you were saying, Aneesa. So.
Absolutely spot on, Gary. Any other interactions there? I'd love to hear from everyone else, because each of you have had your own hero's journey and a radical resilience experience. You might want to share any of those. Anyone brave enough to share?
No, I just think, a lot of what you said there is, people who struggle with it is because they think life should be easy. If you have that idea in your head that everything's supposed to be easy, I should not struggle. But when you accept that, life, there's struggle in life, and when you accept that, then you can accept what comes after. It's like a book I was looking at the other day, Second Mountain. It's like we live life, first mountain, doing all the things to achieve what society has told us to achieve on this first mountain. When we get to the top of it, we realize, hold on, there's a mountain over there, and it's about discovering the self and growing within the self. And it's the internal journey. And that's sort of, the one mountain could bring happiness, but the other mountain brings, sort of joy, true joy, and understanding of who you are.
Well stated, Paul. But now you've led me into another direction right now, if I may, before I go into that question. So let me ask, I'm not going to be doing the talking as much, but I want to gauge your understanding and your experience around this. Anyone who wants to share, what is your view of linking radical resilience to either attachment, detachment, and non-attachment. So I'm going to first start with asking, what is your view of or understanding of the difference between attachment, detachment, or non-attachment?
Non-attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So what does
Well,
it
that's
mean
what
to
I would
you?
say.
What does non-attachment mean to you?
Well, life happens. There's what you expect life to, for our thing to be, and there's what happens. And so there's that non-attachment to the outcome. Is that because if you're constantly attached to how things should be, you're constantly, you're going to have moments where they work out and you're going to be happy. And then so again, there's that happiness aspect. And when they don't work out, you're going to be depressed. Whereas if you're not attached to it, you're just going to be present and be with that
Yes.
experience. Well, that's only my take on it. I'm sure there's more.
Anyone else? I love it. I'm going to share perspective afterwards.
I'm going to say that I think you're actually more what you just said, Paul. I think if you're attached to it, that you're actually more leaning towards just only disappointment, because if it turns out the way that you expect it to turn out, you expected it, right? There's no up surprise, right? And so you're more likely to be disappointed than you are disappointed than you would be to be, thrilled about it. So for myself, the idea of it's a healing journey. So the first thing we do is detach, because we cannot feel what we're feeling, or we can't think what we're thinking. So we separate. And then the next one was so it's attachment is where you have the feeling in the response. Detachment is that first step of healing where you separate. But non-attachment is actually re-engaging, reconnecting in a way that you're not, you become smaller, that you accept as is. And I think that's a beautiful place to be. So that's what I would take from that.
Lily or Michael or Mariam?
I don't mind getting involved. I can't talk about the science about all these. There's so many different theories and theses out there, but I can talk about my past experiences. And I spent a year in isolation in Africa. And one day, sitting on the verge of a sunset, beautiful sunset, I spoke to a wise soul, and a yellow flower sprouted in the field, which brought on a wonderful journey of understanding a sunflower, because a sunflower knows about its shadows. It can have non-attachment to its past, present, and future, but it chooses not to allow its negativity and positive regard, unconditional positive regard, to live in daytime compartments. And sure, sometimes the wind blows and it looks at its shadow, and it's like, I freak out. But the next morning, sure as the sun rises, it embraces a better new life series.
Oh, Michael, that was beautiful. I got goosebumps listening to that. I'm so glad the session is recorded so that I can go and listen to that again. Thank you. So in essence, I mean, the year in isolation, I'd love to talk to you more about that in a separate conversation, obviously. But I think that in my own journey, I have learned that the root cause to suffering is attachment. So it's pretty much what Stephen and Paul and you have all said here. We can't detach ourselves because that's not the optimal place to be. Because if we're detaching ourselves, we're actually saying we don't want to be radically resilient, to embrace, feel, be an allowance of, right? So it's not the healthy, optimal place to be. If you want to be a monk, I suppose you can go and do detachment entirely, and detach from the world. And then there is non-attachment. So the path to mastery and to self-actualization is being radically resilient to accept the as is without worrying about, as you both described, so all three described so beautifully, to the outcome. Because even though there's joy and happiness when we are doing well, this too shall pass. The lesson around impermanence and being in equanimity, those are the tools. And Gary, I mean, it's easier said than done, because if somebody hasn't heard the term equanimity or being equanimous, or all the buzzwords or the labels and the constructs that we are talking about here, it's going to be, so what? So what does that actually mean? But in layman's simple terms is being an acceptance of the hero's journey. I'll bring it back in now because it's very valid at this point. In that hero's journey, whether you're in isolation for that year, you're not alone. And we often think that we are alone. Radical resilience is also knowing that in that journey, you are going to have to face and fight and slay demons, dragons, and villains. But it's what Paul was alluding to. Radical resilience is about being an allowance of seeing those shadow parts of ourselves and not shaming it. Radical resilience says to you, okay, are you in victim to me consciousness that you're going to only in this hero's journey fight the villains and dragons and demons outside in the outside world? Or are you actually willing to pause and say, hold on, what is each experience, person, event mirroring back to me that I need to take heed of, that will require radical resilience and acceptance of? Because once you get to that understanding of this is the journey and I'm not alone, I will have the wise sage. I always use, what's the Gandalf and what's that program that
Lord
that
of the
everybody
Rings.
likes to watch?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. So everybody is going to have a Gandalf, but hold on, we are our own Gandalfs to ourselves. But you need to be able to tap into that and actually believe that you have the sage or the wisdom within to tap into, or relying on your mentors, your peers, that's going to walk alongside you in that journey. But only then, when that radical awareness, and I use that word radical again because it does require radical awareness for you to say, well, if I'm not alone, I'm going to forge ahead, slay whatever I need to slay. That means you're crossing the threshold. You're then moving to the other side of non-attachment, because you're not going to know why that experience happened. It's only when you've crossed the threshold and you're now getting insight. Insight allows you to, and the journey is not linear, by the way. There's no start to or end to it. And that's another aspect of radical resilience, being acceptance of there's not a start and end point. You've got the insight. Now you take that insight, but you've got to go back into, so there are two parts of the hero's journey. The ordinary world, which is the top part, you're sitting within your comfort zone. Rather the devil I know than the devil I don't. When you're going to slay those demons, or whatever you're slaying, you're stepping into the unknown, the darkness. And the darkness is saying, well, hold on, even if I don't know, I'm going to trust the journey, and I'm going to surrender control, and I'm going to remain radically resilient no matter what shows up. Because we think it's only, we need to be radical resilient. Here's the thing, we think radical resilience is only in the darkness. It's also for the bliss. Because once we get a taste of the bliss and the good times, we almost have an attachment to it and expect it's always got to be that way. So radical resilience also asks us to say, hold on, I need to be radical resilient in this context too. It's kind of bizarre, right? It feels kind of flawed. Why should I be radical resilient? Because it's not always going to be blissful. It's not always going to be tranquil. So I'm going to leave it there and then pause for, again, some comments, and then I'll go and look at my questions that I want to ask.
I'm curious about that comment about sorry, Stephen, being the radical resilience towards bliss. What comes up for me in that moment was, I think it is not to be not to see bliss as something that I need to be attached to. I think I see bliss like this. I see bliss as my guiding light, my hope. I know there's going to be moments of it, and then there's going to be moments where it isn't. But it's what drives that hope in me that I can have those moments. I don't attach to them and make the painful moments more painful because I resist them.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to, when you were talking about within us, there's parts of ourselves, made me think of meditation I'm doing at the moment by Bert Goldman called quantum jumping, which is basically part of the process, the hypnosis, the mind, the meditation. You go into a multiverse where there is that version of you that's dealt with this situation, and you chat to them. So I find I find it a good experience.
It's powerful. It's almost chatting to the wise sage part of you 20 years, 30 years from now. What would that Paul say to this Paul today to be concerned about, or versus not to be concerned about?
Well, that's also in ILS coaching. What we learned was, the two-chair process. And quite often in that process, the wise sage turns up, and in the future pacing, which is where, so I'm doing the quantum jumping in the future pacing. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Anyone else?
Isn't that NLP, Paul? Future pacing?
It may come from NLP, but I learned it in the life skills coaching.
Yeah, I think there's a variation of that is in NLP on future pacing.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up for me, and I love that you brought up bliss, Paul, because this idea of the having that release in the future when everything's good, or release when everything's good, it kind of reminds me of a mindfulness technique of meeting for the first time. So you're detaching from the expectation of knowing. And it leads to a wonderful place of forgiveness when there's harm or there's negativity. But I always resisted the idea of, well, but what if you love somebody? What if you have really good times with them? And I realized that it creates that space of falling in love with them or appreciating them or having that amazing experience, that first time experience when everything was wonderful. And it creates that opportunity for that again. And then you brought up this idea of bliss. And I love that, because if you're in that space of non-attachment, your bliss is independent of your surroundings, right? So you can actually be in a state of bliss, even when, otherwise you would be in a severe state of suffering, or you might be in a bliss when otherwise you might have made it normal that your surroundings are good and everything is great. You might find bliss looking at a flower like Michael did. And I think that's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the bliss is, there's no such thing as destination happiness. If my business does R1 million, I would be happy. I'm just using R1 million as a soft figure here, but if I employ so many people, or I do this impact in the community, I would be happy. It's almost like that constant destination for achieving and having something or getting to a point. It's a facade, if I can put it that way. In my own personal life, I've been successful, I've achieved a lot. But there was always almost like that hole in the soul, because there was that attachment, and that was where the suffering came from. So, okay, if I get my qualification, my honors, I'll be fine. If I start my business, I'll be fine. If I find the love of my life, I'll feel content and complete. We also need to be looking back and saying, what's the codependencies within our relationships? Because radical resilience, once again, another angle to it, is having a connected relationship to self that will amplify your own transformation. Because if you are able to know self, you're able to lead self and then lead others. But if you don't, there's constantly going to be the destination happiness that you're seeking. I want to move on because I know it's like 15 minutes to the hour and then we are done, right? This is 1 hour.
It's just a taster. I was just thinking of the two words, Aneesa, accept and expect. Just those two words, is like what we expect when we go wherever in a situation from someone, and we expect something, whereas we can accept anything. So I think just that play on those words there would be a reflection on what we're talking about here.
Yes, and when we talk accept,
Sure.
we in acceptance of with no judgment.
Mm.
And when we have no lens of judgment, I don't know if any of you know Greg Braden. He is a scientist. He talks about the seven ancient Essene mirrors of relationships. I'm not going to talk about all
Can you put that in
here.
the chat, Aneesa? Could you give us that spelling or whatever?
I will now.
Put it in the chat. We can pick it up.
Let me see if I can do that quickly. Seven ancient.
Paul's written, pain expects from life.
It's doing a spell check here. Okay. I hope it's now in. And as I'm going to type, I'm going to talk about just the first three, right? The first mirror of relationships here, I'm going to simplify this and be succinct around it, is what you see in me, I see in you, and there's common ground, and the flow in that relationship is ease and comfortable. The second mirror is, how am I showing up in this moment? Am I judging Paul or Miriam or Michael? So it's the judgment lens, it's the judgment mirror. And often when we're judging the person in front of us, it's an unacknowledged shadow side of ourselves that we haven't yet acknowledged. So that's the second mirror. And I told her I'm going to be succinct. I'll send you a video, Gary, that you can share with the audience in LinkedIn, maybe on LinkedIn. The third mirror is the mirror that you are magnetically drawn to somebody. It could be somebody in your close circle, friends, family, your partner, or it could be somebody that you just acquainted with, whether it is at a store and they're helping you in a store, whatever the environment is. What we're seeing in this person that we're so magnetically drawn to is ourselves. We're seeing how they are I use the word magnanimous maybe as an example, and people feel connected to them and people treat them well. And, you almost think to yourself, but hold on, I have a lot of those personality attributes that this person has. Why is my life very differently? How am I not being treated in the same way as this person might be? What that mirror is asking us to take heed of is, what have you given away of yourself willingly? What have you lost along the way? Or what has been taken away from you? And yet, what you're seeing in the other person, you show up like that within your network or circle, but what you're striving or wanting or yearning for is reciprocation. So if I'm pleasing others, right, and I'm doing and going above and beyond, I'm wanting some level of reciprocation, but I don't often get that reciprocation. So I step into that role, and yet now the accept versus expect comes in here. If I'm in acceptance of, I have empathy and compassion for the other person if they do not deliver on my expectations. But if I'm expecting it, the judgment mirror is going to come up, or even the third mirror, or even the dark night of the soul mirror, where I feel like why is this happening to me every time? Again, in those relationship contexts, we are being asked to be radically resilient there too, because only connected relationships is going to transmute and transcend us to give us the transformation that we so want, that the self-actualization that we want, the success. It's only in those moments when we're in acceptance of, and we're deeply meaningfully connected to ourselves, It's why I call my business craft coaching and advisory. Connected relationships is what amplifies future transformation. But we can't, we're designed to judge. We're designed to seek for stimuli in our environment that makes us want to be in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state. So the resilience part is required here again in relationships, Gary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get into that state of acceptance, because
Yes.
we live very often with expectations, yeah, definitely. I think a bit of soul searching, a bit of work on ourselves to become bigger. Has anyone got any questions here for Aneesa? Because Aneesa's been talking, so we can actually interact with her. Any more questions? No?
I've got one.
Go, Michael.
How are you coping with all the rain in South Africa? Isn't it dreary? It's like so much.
The rain?
It's like every day.
The Cape
No, no,
Townians
no.
are complaining about the heat, though.
No,
No,
All I
I'm
hear
in
from my
Cape Town.
roots in Cape Town is it's so hot. And I'm like, come to Spain where it's
maybe I should
45.
go back to Cape Town.
No. Cape Town is extremely hot, and I'm also in a very beautiful coastal part of Cape Town for those that are not from South Africa, Gordons Bay. So what I have to be radically resilient of is the wind. The southeaster, the Cape Southeaster was made.
But you're so fortunate. For those that don't know, the wind in Cape Town is known as the Cape Doctor. And the reason why they called it that, not only because it cools you down, but it pushes all the viruses away. So people don't get ill.
Yes. Stephen?
I have a question. So, and the question is, so we're all on the different heroes journey, but there's many that, because if you don't heed the call, then you just repeat that journey, right? So, and it's not that you necessarily suffer tremendously, but you don't receive the blessings or the positivity that would come from answering the call. You don't receive the treasure from the adventure. So my question is regarding the people that are in that comfortable misery, right? That tolerable misery. How do you reach them where they know they want to change, but it's just not bad enough yet for them to take up the call?
Can you hear the wind here? Did you just hear that? No. Sorry. I was a bit distracted because the wind just went a bit crazy on my side talking about wind. But let me respond to that. So I have a LinkedIn Live segment that I call Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. So we're moving away from grudge, that resentment, the victim to me consciousness, and shifting into a space of grit, because grit is very closely linked to saying, well, how am I going to have the right level of determination, tenacity, to take on moving into a different realm, to the unknown, right? The unknown that we spoke about. The grace is, how do I give myself grace and others, not just myself, and others, because otherwise that judgment mirror comes up all the time, and the judgment saboteur shows up because we judge, jury, and execution of ourselves. So if I'm embodying grace in whatever the moments are, the experience or the event, I then easily can transcend into a place of gratitude. And that is the space we need to get in, because gratitude is a place of almost receivership. I'm receiving whatever the experience is, and going along with being in acceptance and thankful and grateful for the dis-ease and the discomfort that I'm feeling. Only then can we shift into saying, well, I'm willing to try to move out of, I like what you said there. You said something about misery, the blissful misery.
I said tolerable misery. It means it's not bad enough that you change.
Yes. So I love that, because when you're then able to kind of take on the great gratitude aspect of it, Paul the frog,
The frog.
yes, you
Is
then are able to
that what
transcend.
eat the frog is that the thing, the book, the frog?
Eat the frog.
Yeah.
Brian
No,
Tracy.
it's not eat the frog. Brian Tracy talks about eat the frog, do the hardest thing in the first place. What the similar thing to what Stephen's talking about is you put a frog in hot water, it's going to jump out. But you put it in cold water, put on the heat, it will stay there, not uncomfortable enough. The discomfort isn't strong enough, the pain isn't strong enough for it to
Yes.
move until it's too late. So how do you get, and that's the same as the people Stephen's referring to, how do you get them to move? Because it's not uncomfortable enough.
Yeah. Gary, anything in terms of closing out? I think you've got.
No,
like
that
4
was
minutes.
a good reflection, good thought. It was great talk, Aneesa. Brilliant. So much here. I mean, in an hour, obviously we can't do it all, but thank you for coming along. Thanks everyone for coming along as well. It's been a great session. Radical resilience, traditional resilience, and so on. There's so many different concepts we've taken away. So hopefully I'll see you again next week. The video is going to be, the recording is going to be on YouTube. So if you want to go back and see it, you want to share it or whatever. The BEwell journey continues every Tuesday. So if you see it, you want to share it with your community, with your contacts, or if you want to come along and speak as a guest speaker, as a topic facilitator, just drop me a line, and then we'll agree upon the topic that we want to approach. So again, thank you very much, and have a lovely evening, a lovely day.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Aneesa. And thanks,
you.
Stephen, for the cat.
Thanks, Steve. Lovely cat.
Yeah.
I'm just a human. That's
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice
Thank you.
evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.